Good morning, everyone. We are starting our webinar and we are recording. So we'll see how quickly we get folks in here this morning. We have almost 20 signed up this morning. And if everyone shows up, that's great. It's not a huge number, so I'm asking everyone to please put your questions in the chat rather than the Q&A. I'm assuming everyone knows how to do that, the menu bar at the bottom of the screen. If they're in the chat, put it to everyone, the 3 ellipses, which you can change to everyone other than host and panelist. That way everyone can see the questions, they can see the answers, and you can copy, paste what's in the chat. And I will also put those that information in notes if you need it later. If we don't have a lot more that are coming in than what are signed up, at the end, if you have questions that seem more complicated as far as asking or getting answers, we should be able to let you raise your hand and unmute you so you can ask those questions in person. You can ask them either with your name or you can ask them anonymously, I believe. So with that, that's the overall introduction. We're going to be talking about growing herbs this morning. And I'm Janda. I'm the coordinator at the EnviroHouse, which is the building behind me. We will be opening to the public. We've been closed for over 26 months now. We will be opening in probably the end of May, 3 days a week, and then moving into more hours as the summer progresses. Don't know yet if we'll be doing workshops back on site because the room is really small. So that remains to be seen, but we are scheduled for webinars through June. We have one in July. Jenny will be with us again in May. The end of May, we'll be doing pollinator, is it May? May. May. Yeah. We're doing pollinator gardens. And then we have some other interesting ones coming up that I'll tell you about later before we conclude. So with that, Jenny Call is our regular from representing Garden Sphere, and she is, she'll tell you a little bit about her background. She's a farm girl, she's a teacher. She has lots of creative approaches to dealing with plants and food and all kinds of things. So Jenny, you want to tell a little more about yourself and then we'll get started.
Yes, good morning everyone and welcome to the webinar. And like Jana said, I am from here, I'm from Pierce County, and I am representing Garden Sphere this morning. I grew up in Fife when it was all farmland, and I was kind of brought up with sustainable practices throughout all of my learning of the agriculture and horticulture and animal husbandry and all that fun stuff. And then I'm also a classroom teacher. And so here in Pierce County as well. So I really enjoy this work and I think it's interesting and it's always changing. And there's always a question, like there's always like, how do we solve this problem? So it involves a lot of problem solving sometimes. And it's this is a lot of fun. So today we're going to be talking about herbs. How do we grow them? What are we going to choose? How do we keep them going? Where should we plant them? And how to preserve them at the very end when we've spent all this time growing them.
And Jenny, I just remembered I didn't put the first poll that we were going to launch early.
Oh, go for it. Yes, let's do that.
Do it right now. And then while we're finishing up the intro here, folks could answer, what is your experience growing herbs? So Jenny has some idea on where to put the emphasis as we're talking. So there are, for those who may be phoning in, we're asking, what is your experience? New gardener, no experience, tried growing, but not very successfully, a few basic herbs, but would like to have more. Planted herbs, but have pest and watering problems, or other. And if it's other, you can answer it in the chat.
Yeah. And as we go through this webinar, I will be looking into the chat periodically, probably every other slide or so, to see if there are any questions. And if you have questions, please type them in there because no question is a bad question or an unsmart question. All questions are good questions. And then if you have something that's really worked for you, you know, that, you know, maybe I'm not hitting on and you're like, oh, I've tried this before. Maybe I use foil to keep this out or something. Or, you know, if you've got a tip, a hot tip, go ahead and put that in the chat too. Because all information is welcome. So,
Okay, I'm going to end the poll,
all right.
share the results.
Okay, tried a few basic herbs. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, so you're kind of feeling it out, it looks like. Just kind of dabbling, as it were.
Nobody is completely new, so
Yes.
there you go.
All right, that's cool. Cool to know. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll go through each one. And of course, all of this will be available once it all gets put up. And Janda also is also a resource. If you happen to miss something, you know, you can always email Janda and say, Janda, I missed this. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share.
I can send things out. I can email afterwards too.
Yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible. So, all right, here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. And slideshow. Here we go. All right. So, I have such a good time with this. So I'm going to bring that chat up there. Oh, good morning. Yes, containers. Oh, they're not always healthy. That's okay. We'll talk about that. All right. So again, I am representing Garden Sphere and we're doing herbs, starting them, growing them, and how to preserve them, you know, and we'll get in a little bit about drying flowers because some of the flowers like lavender, you can dry it and oh, there's like so much goodness in that. So welcome. All right, so some of the wonderful gateways to gardening are herbs, right? Because we cook with herbs very frequently, and there's nothing better than cooking with fresh herbs or herbs you've dried yourself, and then sharing that at the table with family or friends, right? So herbs are kind of that way for people to get in and start gardening in a very intentional way, but it's also kind of easy to kind of get in there, buy that herb, bring it in. They're wonderful fresh. Now, the difference you're going to find with fresh versus store-bought is that you don't know how long it's been sitting on the shelf, right? You have no idea, but you know how long and how much work and effort and love goes into your herbs. And so it just gives it that little extra oomph that you enjoy in your food. Most of our herbs are drought tolerant, which in our coming warm, dry summer, you know, this is a benefit, right? We want things that are going to be drought tolerant based on our new weather patterns. Makes it easier for us too, less watering. They are a wonderful addition for pollinator gardens. We bring in all of those great pollinating insects, the birds that come in and eat those insects, everything. So they're a wonderful edible addition. They are a part of our sustainable system. Herbs are something that can be a perennial. A lot of them are a perennial, and a perennial means that it comes back every year or it stays put, right? It's not going to die on you, and you'll have to replant it every year, but it'll come back. So it's also very sustainable. You're not having to buy more plants or plant more seeds. It's just more of a maintenance thing once you start it. Also, it doesn't disturb the soil as much. It is less impact on the environment you have in your space. They smell good. I don't know about you, but anytime I walk by herbs, I brush the leaves and then I kind of rub it on my shirt and stuff, and I smell my hands and I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. So it smells good. It looks good. Yards that have those rows of lavender, and then up the walkways, they have rosemary and thyme. I mean, it's just really aesthetically beautiful. It's very artistic too. Herbs can be grown basically anywhere. And we'll talk about the differences. It's basically a light or a water thing that's different, but you can grow them pretty much anywhere, which is really, really handy. And then, you know, we've talked about cooking. So, you know, cooking, who doesn't like cooking? Some things to think about for a successful plant and it growing to fruition and flowering and you getting the benefits of it. You really need to have a minimum of about 4 hours of sunlight. And that's where you're going to find on your little tags. Sometimes it'll have that full sun and sometimes it'll have like that half blue and half sunny, a partial sun. Partial sun means about 4 hours a day. A lot of the very perennial hardy herbs are going to need probably somewhere between 6 and 10 hours a day, at a minimum, maybe 6. So think about your space, you know, where do you get the most sunlight? And then if you have some herbs that might take a little bit of shade, they're a little bit tender, you might want to place them in a place that has more morning light than afternoon light, because that afternoon light can be very, very harsh. The soil space or depth, right, for the root systems, 6 inches to 3 feet, kind of depending on what you're planting. Okay, so like if you're going to do basil's an annual here. Basil, you'll have to replant every year. There are some parts of the country where you can grow basil forever and ever. But basil here in the Pacific Northwest, if you're planting it outside, it is an annual, and you only really need about 6 inches of soil, and it'll do absolutely fine. So we'll talk about the different needs of various herbs as well. Think about where you want it. Is it going to be in a pot? Is it going to be in a raised bed? Is it going to be in open ground? You know, kind of what do you got going on? Do you have a patio that you are going to have them in pots? What kind of pots should you get? You know, terracotta are going to be tough, basically because they wick the water out, and you're going to be doing a lot more watering. Pots that have that glaze are going to keep that water in more and not wick it out as much. There's lots of recycled pots, which are really fantastic. So lots of options here to think about. I know it can be kind of overwhelming. And then if they are in pots, they're going to have access to water, right? They're going to have to, are you going to use a water, call them a water pick? And you put the water in and it slowly releases the water. Are you going to have it as a part of your sprinkle system, or are you just going to hand water it? I still hand water, and I've got lots of land, so kind of depends on what your situation is. When you're starting out, May and June is the perfect time to plant. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's just right. It's just like Goldilocks, right? So the chair isn't too hard. The chair isn't too soft. It's just right. So this is like the sweet spot. Once we get into late June, it does start to get too hot. The reason why May and June are wonderful times to plant is because of their root system can just kind of settle in, and it can grow. It's not going to get bombarded with heat and go, oh God, you know, and have to get stunted. It just has this nice ease into the summer weather, right? And you're able to establish that root system. A plant that has a strong root system will be a strong plant, and a strong plant will produce the herbaceous material, right? The leaves, the flowers, much more bountifully, right? So it'll produce so much more, and it'll taste good too. The flavor actually changes. A healthy plant has a very bold flavor. A plant that is struggling is going to be a little bit more on the bitter side. So really, this is perfect. So I'm glad you're here. We are right at the cusp of May, being the last day of April. And so this is absolutely perfect. I'm gonna check the chat real quick. Oh, we're looking good. Okay. All right. Another thing to consider, I know this is a lot, is indoor or outdoor. Now, there's a lot of debate about this, and indoor or outdoor it's kind of a tricky wicket, because you can start most of your things indoor, right? If you're starting from seed, starting them indoors gives them a really nice consistent temperature. You control the water, you control whether it's really breezy in your home. You can get a light and really, you know, boost up that light. You have a lot of control, the heat in the room, but most herbs will eventually grow very weak indoors, okay? Because they need that very bright sun, okay? And they really fail to thrive. They fail to go to their full potential when they're indoors. But like in the wintertime, sure. I mean, you want your basil, you want fresh basil, and you don't want to have to go to the grocery store. So you sprinkle some seeds in a pot, you let it go. That's different than say keeping rosemary inside, right? Those annual plants, the parsleys, the cilantros, there's a lot of annuals there. You can start them inside, and have them go through the winter so you have your fresh stuff. But like our perennials, like lavender's gonna look at you and go, dude, can you just put me outside? I just want to go outside, because they need the light. They need that transition of cold to warm to sun. Like they need that temperature transition to be successful and to flower in a way that is just like really, really full. And so they need that temperature change. Rosemary is the same way. Sage is the same way. We've got a lot of perennials that really need that temperature change. But that being said, like I said before, the annuals, the basils, the parsley, cilantro, you want the fresh stuff inside. Chives to an extent do great. They start inside. You're like, cool, this is awesome. I just have some beautiful herbs and they smell good and I can eat them. But overall, once you've started them inside, once the temperatures are good, put them outside. You're going to see the benefits of the flavor will change. The flavor will become more bold, might be more sharp, spicier. The flowers, most of the flowers on these herbs are edible. And so a lot of times herbs that are started indoors, but then kept indoors, they won't flower out. So you don't get the benefit of having that beautiful chive flower in your salad, because it can't go through that life cycle in a natural way. So absolutely, yes, start them indoors. If you have seeds, go for it. If you want your small winter garden, put it by a south-facing window or under a little grow light, have your herbs all winter long. But if you're looking for longevity, make sure they end up going outside eventually. Okay, any questions about that? Because I know it can be kind of one of those things where you're like, oh, I don't know.
Jenny, there is a question about when you get to it, about when you're taking the plants out of containers, the roots growing out of the bottom of the plants, and how do you safely transplant them without killing them?
Oh, okay. I'm not, oh, there it is. I gotta scroll down. Oh yeah. Some of them don't like their roots disturbed and some of them do. That's, yeah, we'll talk about that. Most of them will be okay. If they're not completely root bound, you want to try to keep as much of that soil around it as possible. But you do have to kind of break it up. And if their roots are really, really long, you actually have to trim them. So yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Here's our first like official inside poll. What are you thinking that you want to start with some seeds, starter plants, seeds and starter plants? Are you going to propagate? That means you're going to take a cutting and then you're going to try to grow that herb from the cutting. Any other things you're thinking about? Transplanting, right? You could transplant your herb from one yard to another, maybe. I apologize. My allergies are getting me today. What was that, Janda?
I said we have almost everyone. A couple more if they want to answer that question. If not, I will end the poll soon. For those who may be listening in, I think you went through seeds, plant starts, seeds and starts, propagating. We don't have anybody in other.
Yeah. Okay.
So there we go.
Awesome.
Oh, I ended it, but I didn't share.
Okay, both doing the combo. One person's gonna try to propagate. Cool. If you could put that in the chat, what you're thinking about propagating, I'm curious. I'm curious about what you're gonna do, because it's always fun. Lemongrass. All right, lemongrass. Well, yeah, you could do that. You could do the root system. Lemongrass is kind of a tricky one though. It is an annual here. Lemongrass is an annual here. So you wouldn't, I mean, honestly, lemongrass is easier from seed or from a start. Propagating it would be dividing its root system, because it's not a woody plant. However, basil you can propagate. So you could take a cutting off of a basil stem and like put some rooting stuff on there, and you can grow another basil plant. That's just kind of cool. But you could divide the root system if you've kept your lemongrass inside for the winter. So lemongrass can keep going if you bring it in the wintertime. And just grow it. Yeah, grow it outside for the season, and then grow it inside for the winter. Yeah, you could totally do that and just let it root. Yeah, you could totally do that with lemongrass. You would do a fresh, so with rosemary, what you would do is you would get a fresh cutting. So you would take a cutting off of new growth, and then you would make it fairly long. So about 4 inches long is always good. And then you would put rooting solution around it. And I like to use like a very, very fine, combination of like core and no compost or anything, but like a core and some wood shavings, and just get it somewhere where it's going to have lots of drainage, but the moisture will stay. So the wood chips and not wood chips, but like wood shavings or like carpentry shavings that are really fine. They hold moisture really well, but they don't, the root won't rot. And so you stick the rooting solution on there, and then you put it in a little cup, and then you can keep it, the roots will slowly grow off of that, and it'll start growing off of that, but it has to be fresh, or new growth, I guess you could say. You would do that with like fruit trees and other trees too. You would take that new growth and then put it down a little bit, put the rooting solution on there, and it does work. I've done that with rosemary, and it's kind of cool when it works. It's like you're doing science in your house, which is way fun, doing science in your house. So as we start talking about starts, and there we go. Okay, Janice, chat popped up. So as we start, so seed, I know most of you want to do a combination of seeds and plants. So seeds, the benefit of getting the seed packet is that you get a whole lot of seeds. So there's like a whole lot of leeway. Like if one doesn't germinate, then you're like, all right, cool. All right, I can try again. I've got like 50 more seeds. Let's go. Let's make this happen. So your odds are really good of like having success there. And you have a lot of chances to like try again. It does require more time, and it does require, babying them, so you've got to have a spot where you're going to put the seeds and little pots, and you want to start with a starter mix. You don't want to start off with a full-on like potting mix, because the thing with the starter mix is it's a little bit more loose. It's finer. Not only that, but it is more of a sterile environment. If you get a potting soil, just straight up potting soil, there's going to be compost and stuff in there. And sometimes what happens is that the compost, especially if it has mycelia in it, or in the microbes and stuff, it'll actually, the seed will rot depending on what seed it is. So always start with a starter mix, a really nice starter mix, a fresh starter mix, not one that's like 4 years old. Because I know critters like to go in bags, and it's really inexpensive and easy to do. Just requires a little bit of babying. Seasonally, everybody has herbs right now. If you got a seeds a seasonal herb plant, like you could just go out and buy them right now. Like they're all over the place right now. Like at Garden Sphere, we have a whole rack of herbs, and we have like them in 4-inch pots, and we have them in half gallons and in gallons. Like they're very easy to grow when they're already root established, size established. The nice part about getting the plant starts, is that you can pick a strong start. Look at them, see if there's even growth, see if there's been any damage. You can really be picky and choosy about it because you're buying them, right? You can look at them. You can also verify the variety. So there's like oh gosh, like 15 types of mint, right? And you know, you can verify, like, I want chocolate mint, or I want the mojito mint because I make lots of mojitos, or I want, you know, a peppermint, or, you know, things like that. So you can verify what you're getting. So benefits and drawbacks of both, because the starter is going to cost more, but you get to really see it up close and, you know, really pick it out. With the seeds, the seed packets run, you know, upwards of like $3.49, but you get like a bajillion seeds in a packet, and you get lots of chances to kind of try it out and see what grows and see what happens. So it tends to be a lot of fun. Either way, it's pretty good. Yeah, rosemary, they're in the chat there. It says rosemary spontaneously died. Yeah, it's true. Rosemary eventually does die out. You know, like any of the plants and like anything that's living, it has a life cycle, right? And depending on where the plant was, depending on the soil, depending on our temperatures, if it is too extreme in any of those areas, or it's not getting enough, they will just die. I had a sage, full sage, a giant sage plant, but our winter got so cold, and it was just out in my on the property. It wasn't, you know, next to the house or anything where it would have been more protected, and the entire sage plant died because of the extreme temperature and not being in a very protective place. So it does happen. Get a new one. Try out a different one. There's the barbecue ones that are really straight up. There's like so many different varieties of rosemary. You could play with it and buy like 4 and make them all different types. So have a staircase of rosemary. That would be fun. And seeds you would want to start indoor, especially with basil. Basil, you want to start it indoors right now because the outdoor temperature it's not cold hardy. So if you can start basil inside in a pot and then plant them out in, say, mid-June, totally good. Because our weather is so chaotic right now and with spring, and our temperatures are just a little bit too low at night. And just like tomatoes don't like the cold. Basil and tomatoes are like best friends, and they don't like to have really chilly weather. So, and I would say just start your basil now. Not a big deal. You know, start it before the end of May. You're cool. It'll totally work. The annuals and perennials. So we've talked a little bit about this. You know, the annuals, they come around every year, right? You have to plant them every year or put the seed down every year because the temperatures or our particular climate isn't made for them to winter over. So basil's one of them, lemongrass, cilantro, lemon verbena, not lemon balm. Lemon balm, super hardy. It's like you can't kill it and it spreads everywhere. But lemon verbena, if it's in a protected place, will come back. But if it's not protected, it tends just to die out because our winters are too cold for it. And so you can just grow these by seed or get a start plant every year. And once our soil temps are at about 49 to 52 degrees, which tends to be like the middle of May, then you can start planting those all out. Or, you know, you just like the daytime temperatures are above 55 pretty consistently, just plant them out. They'll be totally fine. That being said, and this goes back to the root systems and how to transplant them, basil doesn't like to have its roots touched. They're like, so just leave us in our little spot and we'll be fine. So basil, you just want to kind of, if it's root bound, and root bound means if the roots have, they've started compacting at the bottom, right? And they become like this hard mass and the roots are kind of stuck in its pot, right? And so if they become root bound, you do have to got to break it up because you want to encourage the roots to kind of grow out because it'll be able to pick up more nutrients and water and it'll be lush and beautiful. Basil wants you to just like gently massage the root system and then plant it. And then give it lots of food and lots of water and lots of attention and music and I don't know, a live band. Basil just wants all the good things before, like for the first 2 weeks. It's like, no, pamper me. But like lemongrass, cilantro, when you do grow it, I just grow cilantro from seed because cilantro just is like no big deal. Grow it from seed. so those lemongrass, not a big deal. Loosen those roots, put them in. Lemon verbena can be a little temperamental, so just be gentle with the roots and make sure that you have some out. Again, if any of these annuals have root systems that are too long, trim them. Because you don't want to have to be, if you're putting them in pots, you don't want to have to like dig a giant hole and be like, come on, oh, your root still, just trim it. It's fine. It'll be fine. And it'll encourage the root system to start spreading out. So there's kind of double benefits there. Perennials, they're going to stick around. Now, there's perennials who are here year in, year out. You plant it once. It is either herbaceous, which means it's going to die back and grow back every year, or it is woody, and it'll just stay up and be like, hey, I'm here in wintertime. Look at me, I'm gorgeous. And so they're going to keep. Now, there are things that are called biennials, and biennials are herbs that they'll grow and be great and do everything that first year. They're going to stick around through the winter. They're going to come back. But that second season, that's when they're going to throw their flowers and throw up seed. And then they're going to want to start that cycle all over again. So biennial means that it will go to seed every other year to reseed itself, which is kind of cool because then you don't have to do anything. You just let it reseed itself. And then you get a bunch of babies and you can share them. So, which is pretty awesome. Planting, we talked a little bit about this. Planting is, you gotta think of light. You gotta think of where's your water coming from. Is it gonna be in a raised bed? Is it gonna be right in the soil? Is it gonna be in a pot? If you're using pots or raised beds, use a potting raised bed mix. Now, even if they're going to pots, okay, it's going to be cheaper, just so you know, to get the 3 cubic compressed cube of raised bed mix because it's compressed, right? So you get a lot more once you start loosening it all up. Plus, you can use it for vegetables. It already has like some wonderful microbes and compost and things in it. You really don't have to fertilize that first month and a half, 2 months, because it's got all the goodness in there. Potting soil does too. No bad on that potting soil, but the raised bedding mix, often when you kind of price it all out and what you end up using tends to be a better deal. And you're going to want to water it. The raised bed, 2-3 times a week, depending on our rain. Now, if we get a light drizzle, but it's very warm, you're still going to want to water. But if we're getting like these intermittent, like whoosh water raining events like we have been, don't even worry about it. You're going to be fine. The test is stick your finger in the soil, in your pot or your raised bed, wherever you are, really, truly. Stick your finger in. If you're feeling moisture down here at the bottom of that first digit, you're fine. Okay. If it's dry all the way and you feel no moisture at the tip of your finger, get some water in there. And water it thoroughly. So what I like to do is I water everything one time. I go back, water everything again. I water twice. And I do this so I don't have to water nearly as much. The water is going down deeper, drawing those roots down into that soil. And it's wonderful, right? It makes way less work for you as we start getting into the warmer season because those roots are going down trying to get that water. So it's a good thing. If you are going into the ground, you're going to mix the soil that is already in that spot, right? Put a little bit of compost in there. I love using mushroom compost if you can get it, and worm castings. Those are my 2 go-tos. I love them. Not to mention there's a whole workshop on worm bins and worm composting. Super easy, and you can make your own.
It was just posted, and let me throw something else in here too. The worm bin webinar was last week, and it just went up online, so you can see that, the recorded version. But also, I mentioned in the chat that Jenny had done container planting how-to webinars for us. And those you can see online. And then also, if you check that how-to website, I'm watering. I forgot what I was going to say. Okay. It's probably way down. What farther back because it's been quite a while since we did it, but there is a how-to webinar on how to set up drip or mini spray tube irrigation for a raised bed, when you can buy the kits, and how to assemble those and how to put that up. And it's really pretty easy, and it helps control your watering. So that's at that same YouTube website I put in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Janda. Yeah, those are so handy, you know, if you're looking for good information. So yes, the mushroom and worm compost are my favorite go-tos. You are going to have to fertilize that area the first growing season. That's until we get our very first hard frost, which tends to come at the end of October, beginning of November. You're going to have to fertilize it, or make sure you've mulched and things like that around your herb, your new herb, once a month ish. Herbs, once they're established, they really don't need a whole lot. So you'll fertilize, you know, maybe once a year, do it in the springtime, or maybe you do it in the fall, so those root systems can feed all winter long. But you are definitely going to want to put a mulch around that if you're in the ground. One, it'll keep the weeds down. We don't like the weeds. Now, weeds are plants that we don't want growing in a particular place. So one person's weed is another person's magic. It'll also keep moisture in way better. And so you're watering less as well. So it's a nice little combo. If you would like to put mulch, and a mulch is like wood chips, or maybe some, if you've got dried leaves, anything that is like a nice layer on that top part of the soil. And you can do that in your pots too. It'll keep the moisture down. I mean, the moisture in the pot, in the raised bed and in your soil. So watering doesn't have to become like a drag, you know, like, oh, I gotta go water. So it'll help with that. Types of herbs. Now, we've talked about herbaceous, we've talked about the woody ones. They're the evergreen herbs. Evergreen herbs, or the woody herbs, are going to be planted outside. I know. We really want to have lavender planted inside because it is just a lovely scent. But they're not going to do well. So plant them outside, full sun. They will be beautiful all year round. Rosemary especially is gorgeous. Lavender, it does kind of go back and become very dull in the winter. But once that new growth starts, you see this like silvery green growth, and it's just like, oh, it pops, right? Oregano is what I like to call like an herb green, because oregano will die back a little bit. Okay, so it won't stay evergreen. It's kind of that middle ground. It's going to have some leaves that hang on, and some of the plant will die back. So it'll look really scraggly in the wintertime. But don't let that fool you. It's not dead. Like mine looks horrendous because of the cold weather this winter, and it is now starting to get its little green guys back, little green leaves. It's an evergreen. It will stay. They make all kinds of times too. So we've got the walkable thyme, woolly thyme, which is so much fun. Don't eat it though. It doesn't taste really good. Bay laurels. If you haven't seen a beautiful full-grown bay laurel tree before, if you go to Urban Tilth in Seattle, in Wallingford, they have a beautiful bay laurel tree, and it is miraculous, and the flowers are outstanding, and the leaves are just tasty. I mean, it's a beautiful tree, and it does really well here in the Pacific Northwest. When you go to a nursery, the bay laurel is going to be, I don't know, 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall. And it's going to be quite small. If you put them in a pot, they'll stay quite small. But you have bay leaves for all of your culinary delights, and they do flower. It's different than our laurel hedge, right? You're not going to eat that, but the flowers are wonderful for our pollinators. The bay laurel, you can eat, use the leaves for flavoring and whatnot. And again, it flowers. It's a laurel, so it's pretty cool. Herbaceous, or things that are going to be very tender. Okay, and not a woody plant. We call that an herbaceous plant. Your chamomiles, mints, parsleys, lemon balm, borage, borage spreads. Just be careful. Oregano. There is an invasive fennel and a bulb fennel. Actually, technically, they're both bulbs. Just be careful which one you get. Chives come back every year once you get them established, and they're really cool. You eat the flowers and the chive greens. Catnip. Catnip is part of the mint family. Just a little tip about the mint family. Mint travels. Okay, so it will grow out from its planting place. So every year or two, you're gonna have to rein in that mint. And what I like to do is I dig up, because it'll start in the center and then it'll start growing outward, away from that original spot, and it will grow out in rings. And so I always will dig it up and I'll loop it back around into its spot. And it maintains a spot, but you have to kind of corral it in. It's like herding a nicely smelling cat back into its spot. Catnip, if you let it go to flower, catnip will just spread its love everywhere, like lemon balm. And its seeds will go everywhere, and it's lovely. If you have neighborhood cats, you will be their best friend. And lemon balm spreads as well. So when you plant those things, just be careful. Don't feel bad about pulling out of a spot that you don't want it. Lovage. I always like to talk up lovage. It is a perennial herbaceous herb. Just like the best, right? So if you have struggled growing celery, lovage, the stalks taste like a very strong celery. Put some peanut butter on there, put some almond butter on there, put some Nutella on there, even better. So good, okay? The leaves, you can dry them, use them in all of your soups, use them in your cooking, use them in your stir fry in the wintertime. They get quite tall, so you need a space where the lovage can grow to its full height. It flowers out, brings in the pollinators, and then it just sticks around. It comes back every year. You can divide it after the third year. You can cut off a section of the roots and then share it, right? Lovage is lovely. Lovage is lovely. It's in the name, it's love. Marjoram, tarragon, all of those things are wonderful. Chamomile can sometimes be very frustrating to start. It takes a couple of years to establish itself, but it will reseed itself again and again once it takes hold. Okay, so don't be discouraged. Parsley, curly parsley, oh, it will go through the winter. You'll have fresh parsley in the wintertime outside, even in the snow. Stuff is like tough as nails. Just put it on out there. It is really, really hard. The only way that it dies is if the roots get rotted out. Okay. Otherwise, parsley for days. It's wonderful. So go for it, go for it, go for it. On there for the annuals, we've talked about basil and cilantro. Cilantro turns into coriander. Okay. And if you let it go to flower and to seed, you've got coriander, which is two birds, one plant, which is wonderful. Dill is also an annual, but if you let it go to flower and seed, it will reseed itself. So a lot of these things will come back if you let them. If you let them go through their whole life cycle, they will come back, less work for you, okay? And that's what we like, less work for you. The more manageable something is, the more likely you are to do it, okay? And to enjoy it and continue, right? Here is our next question. What seems to be your biggest obstacle? Lots of things on here. Space, light, soil. You're like, oh, I have so much clay. I don't even know what to do with myself. I get it. We live in the Pacific Northwest. Our soils are all over the place, depending on where you live. Too many rocks. I have a use for those rocks. We could make something with that. Water, get a rain barrel. You could set it up next to your plants, collect all that rain. There you go. You've got water. Even a small one, like one of those giant pickle jars. You can turn it into a little mini rain barrel. Set it on your porch. You totally do it. You got a little bit of water to spare there if you need it. Cost.
Jenny, I think I made that a multiple choice. So if people have more than one issue, they can.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
More
than one.
Lots of them.
Oh, for sure. For sure. There's been a lot of free plant and giveaways lately in Tacoma with Fig. And so that, there are ways to get around that. Some nurseries, if the plants are looking a little bit sickly, I know we do put them out in the alley, and those are free, and you get the pot, so you can do seeds in the pot that you just used to plant your herbs. Reuse all that stuff. Yeah, there's lots of free stuff out there. So
I'm going to end the poll. I think we've got as many as are going to answer. So there you go.
Space. Yeah.
I didn't read the questions for anybody listening in, but lack of space, not enough sunlight, poor soil quality, no easy access to water, cost, especially starting with plants, not knowing what to plant and how to start.
Yeah.
So looks like we have responses to 3 of those areas: lack of space, poor soil quality, and not knowing what to plant and how to start.
What's the other? I'd love it if, oh, there it is. Forgetting to water or transfer. Oh, Nancy, it happens to us all. It does. I'm telling you, there are some plants that have been in pots for years because I just haven't gotten to them. I understand. Don't be embarrassed. I think that's part of the gardener's plight is we do too much. So let's see. And some of these do bolt. Yes. So Jenna, you had put in the question, like, do some of them bolt? So like, yeah. So cilantro notoriously bolts, but then you get your coriander, right? And you could use the seeds that after they bolt, you could use those seeds and just keep replanting it and cycling it through. If I go back, let's see if I can go back one slide. The basil will eventually flower out, and that's basil, you want to pinch it back. So as soon as you see any kind of flower bud forming, you pinch back that head. Oh no, now you have to use it. Oh man, or just eat it right there. So you just, the basil will turn bitter if you let it go to full flower. However, then you get the seeds to plant some more. So, it's kind of what you want to go there. Lemon balm will go to seed and flower out. Dill. Now, dill, if you let the flower go, you can use it. Dill, you can use the dill seed in cooking. So again, it will flower out. It won't bolt per se though. And then lemongrass doesn't really bolt. Lemongrass just kind of dies away sadly. No matter how much I try, I can't keep it going. So
one thing before I go off camera again, on basil, and I don't remember if it was you or Sass or maybe Hal who's listening in, but somebody at one point said, if you're not using your basil and it's getting ready to flower or go to seed, just keep picking it because you can preserve it. And I think one of Hal's how-to videos shows how to do that. How to preserve the basil. And I think you've done that before too. And
yeah,
but yeah, you can just keep picking it. And if you're not going to use it right away, look at the techniques on how to preserve it.
Yeah, well, and we'll talk about how to preserve some of these things too. So it'll work out really well. Basil, there's lots of ways you can preserve it, which is kind of neat about basil. And here we go talking about preserving. Drying and preserving. So, Hal, let's see. Yes, see, I do that too. I do that too. I will take it and I'll put a little bit, like, I have one ice cube, right, tray that I use. And, you do some of the leaves, put some olive oil in there. And once they're all nice and hard, I stick them all in one bag and great minds think alike, Hal. This is so great. So harvesting leaves, okay. please harvest in the morning if you can. Okay, that's when the oils are most concentrated because it's been nice and cool overnight. Once they start to warm up, just like oils in your kitchen, they'll start spreading out. They'll start moving through your herbs. And you pick them and eat them, of course. But the oils and everything are so much more concentrated when the herbs are very cool. The leaves are cool. So you want to also do it before they flower or bolt. And bolting is when the plant starts to create its seed head, and it's generally centrally located in that plant. A lot of herbaceous plants. Cilantro notorious for it, and they'll create a very thick stalked part of the plant in the center, and that's where it's going to create its flower and its seed head. So you're going to have to harvest that and preserve it before it flowers or bolts, using a clean cutting tool, scissors, a cutting knife, whatever you feel comfortable with. It's going to give it a nice clean cut. I tend to use my thumb, and I'll pinch down on a leaf, or I'll take the full stem, depending on the herb and what I'm going to be using it for. If you can, do the whole stem. So like with mint, let it get as big as it can, and then cut it until you have, about 4 inches, 4 to 6 inches off the ground. Cut that whole top part. If you can, keep those stems on there, because it will help ease your drying. So you're going to very gently wash them. Okay. Very, very gently wash them. Just do like the mist setting or something, and then you're just going to kind of pat off the excess water, let it air dry. Okay. So, and that's with all the leaves. That's exactly how you're going to do it. It's can be time consuming, right? So, set aside, half hour to go out and do your leaf harvesting if you need to. Now, if you're harvesting the flowers, you've let your plant go all the way to where it's flowering. And again, do it in the morning. That's again where all the oils, all the good stuff is really concentrated, right? Clean tool. You're going to clip the whole stem of the flower or the head of the flower. Now you can see in the picture of the chamomile, you're going to get that head. Dandelion, same thing. You're going to clip those heads off. I know I'm saying dandelion. Oh my gosh, an herb. Yes, that crazy dandelion is a wonderful herb to use. So if you have them and you don't spray and you're in a wonderful area, you're going to harvest it just like you would chamomile. Take those heads, and then you're going to kind of give them a gentle shake, or switch, to get some of the debris insects off. You don't want to kill our insects, because all the insects do something. And then the stems, you're going to tie them together, or if they're heads, if you have a very fine mesh screening, you can put all the heads on. I like to put them flower head down when I dry them on paper towels, or I dry them on a open screen to dry them, because I like to have my flower heads with my chamomile and my other flowers that I dry, the calendula, I like to have them dry open. I find that when I am just harvesting for the petals, that keeps the petals open and they're easier to harvest. Also, it looks really pretty when you stick it in a jar to keep them around for the rest of the season, right? Lavender, you've got your beautiful long stems, you flip it upside down, okay? Tie a bundle together, okay? Not a giant bundle. I would say enough for maybe a nickel size bundle, okay, and tie it together upside down. Now, I know a lot of folks like to wait until the flowers have dried on the lavender itself, and keeping the flowers on there for the pollinators to harvest. But again, the smell and the flavor are not going to be nearly as strong and pronounced if you let it dry on the plant. So yes, you're keeping them there for maybe you harvest 1/3, right? 1/3 of that lavender plant, and then you leave the other 2/3 for your pollinators. But you do want to harvest lavender, and you can harvest the rosemary flowers as well when they're flowering, because you'll get a really strong, beautiful flavor for baking and for making oils and tinctures and things. So it's kind of important having those flowers wide open. You do need to make sure that they haven't fully gone through their life cycle of the flower, right? Because most of these, they're going to, like with the chamomile and the calendula, they're going to flower out, they're going to open, they're going to be good really for about 2 to 3 days, maybe. And then they're going to start going, a lot of the chamomile, they'll start going downward, and then their seeds, they're going to start going into seed preparation, right? And the calendula does the same thing. So you want to get it, they've opened up day 1, maybe harvest them day 2. Okay. Get them really young because the flavor is going to be outstanding, and that's what you want, right? Yes, absolutely. Put those, I'm looking in the chat, using the mint and the basil for mojito or mint ice cubes. That is a wonderful use of that mint. Some ways to dry out your leaves. So you can, and I've done this with mint. I've put them in a paper bag. I've hung mint, I've bundled mint and put them in a paper bag. I've done all kinds of different drying. If you prefer another drying method, that's totally fine. If you're drying mint or the lemon balms or anything that's very leafy, right? You're going to dry them. And if you're bundling, you're going to dry them upside down. I can't remember, it's oxidation happens, and they'll turn black, which is really crazy, because you're like, oh, I don't want to use that. It's lost all of its green color. So drying them up and upside down is great. If you want to use a dehydrator, I found this wonderful picture of a 70s round plastic dehydrator, and the dehydrator, my folks had that one. They work fantastic, and I know they sell them now. The middle one is a stainless steel dehydrator, and I have that one. I love it because it's easy to clean. I can pack a lot of stuff in there, especially when I'm doing apple chips. This is a solar contraption dehydrator. They actually work really well. I have a friend who uses one, and it works. Sometimes I feel like it works better because you can see what's going on. You really have a lot of control. And in the summertime, what better use, right, of our solar rays in the summertime, right? You're so sustainable. I love that. And then you can also do like on cookie racks, or like, this is an official baking rack, but use it for dehydrating, right? You can use your cookie racks. Whatever you do, if you do have it in the open like this, that's parchment on there. You do want to make sure that they're covered to keep dust off of them. Because that's no fun. Or like I have cats, and they steal my drying materials, so I have to keep them covered. So lots of different ways. Just pick one and go with it. If you don't like it, there are lots of designs out there for ones you can do it yourself. We're going to talk about drying flowers too. Drying flowers is a lot of fun. This is a straw flower here. I love growing straw flower just so I can make dry flower bouquets, and those last all winter long, and it gives me nice color. Again, you're going to cut the whole stem. You're going to give them a gentle shake. You're not going to rinse them off though, okay? So don't apply any water to them. Harvest them in the morning or when they just first wonderfully open. You are going to dry them upside down. You can they have to be in a really nice dark place. So you could bundle them and then place a paper bag around it and tie it to your bundle upside down. I have done this method here in the picture where you string it, as long as it's in a nice dark place and you're able to have it in a nice dark place. And then you're just going to leave it alone. Just totally going to leave it alone. Stedis is a really lovely flower as well. I dry that as well. And they come in all kinds of colors, and the colors stay true when you're drying flowers that are intentionally grown for drying. The colors really do stay true. And I think really straw flower tends to have the most bold colors, right? The reds and the oranges, and really beautiful fall colors. I like to use the straw flower for that. Looking good in the chat. Now you've dried your leaves. You are going to easily, so I take the stem and I'll use my pencil here. Say all the leaves are going up because I've dried it upside down. So they're all facing this way. Flip it over and just use your fingers and all the way down. They should come off really easily. If they don't, that's okay. Just give it a little wiggle. It's nice and dry. It's going to break anyway. Sometimes, depending on the plant, I will keep the stems because the stems do house flavor. That kind of depends on the plant. But you know, get all those leaves. You're going to want to keep them in a whole form. Okay. Don't crush them because then what you're doing is you're breaking up those flavonoids and you want to keep all the flavor in the oils as concentrated as possible without breaking out those flavonoids. And then in a glass jar or a vacuum pack or something that's going to be very airtight. Okay. Clear jars need to be stored in a dark space. If you have jars that have the tinting, right? Some jars have like the brown tinting or the blue tinting or the green tinting on the outside. Those are fine to sit out on the counter, but if they're clear jars, they really do need to be stored in a dark place or a place that doesn't get a whole lot of light because light does affect the longevity of your herbs and it will diminish the flavor over time. Most herbs are good right on the shelf for about 6 to 9 months. And that goes right into when we have to start preparing them again. So you'll eventually find out how much you need and how much you go through because you really want to just use up all you have before you do more. They really don't last more than 9 months with their fresh flavor. You can keep them longer, but like with all herbs, the flavor will be diminished. But if you don't mind, you don't mind. I mean, not a big deal. That's okay. You can also there are lots of other ways to do this as well. So you can put them in ice cubes. And that's dried material into the ice cubes as well as fresh material into ice cubes and save them in your refrigerator. I like to do that with teas sometimes when I'm making iced teas. I saw that suggestion there for iced tea. It does work really well actually for punches, things like that. And herbs that you would use, culinary herbs, fantastic. Olive oil, you could use almond oil, you could use avocado oil, you know, all these options, right? To like freeze in cubes. So you have lots of choices, but if they are dried, you do want to keep them in an airtight container. Otherwise they do kind of go south. So, so that's, you know, are there any questions about that? So much information on herbs. It's just like so much you can do. Like it's such a cool subject, you know, like the fun you can have, like the health benefits, right? You do your own chamomile, you know, you can have this wonderful relaxation tea you can make for yourself, you know. Lavender, put it with millet into a pillow, you know, and or rice, you know, and have it as a warmer, you know. There's so many cool things you can do. These are the finishing flowers. So once they're completely dry, just make your bouquets. So in this bouquet here, we have baby's breath and we have status. And baby's breath also dries really well. It can be a little bit tricky to grow, but you would grow it from seed. And it really is lovely. And so if you wanted to save, say you're using lavender maybe in cooking, right? So you could take you would remove it just like you would with the herbs. You would take the hold the opposite direction and then whoop, take all the flowers off. I know some people make lavender cookies and lavender breads and lavender biscuits and lavender scones. And so there's some really wonderful things you can make with marigolds, drying your marigolds. Using those in tea, oh, delicious, right? There's so many flowers you probably haven't even thought of, like violets, you know, making violet jelly, you know, ooh, there's like I don't know, it's endless. So again, if you're going to store the flowers themselves for use, just make sure they're in an airtight container. And if they're for display them, get them out there, put them in the middle of your coffee table or in the kitchen where you are always at, you know, really just make them present and enjoy them. That's the whole key, right? You just need to enjoy it. Yeah, you could totally make wreaths in that. A lot of fun. here we've got some chives. Here's some oregano and rosemary and some sage. Nice display, but all three of those would have to be planted in the ground or outside. This is the flower. If you've never seen chives flower out, the flowers are edible and they're quite tasty. They have a mild chive flavor to them. And then you can also let them go fully to seed. And then I like to dump the seed heads right directly into their spot. And so I've got babies all over the place. Let's see. Are there any questions? I think all of the things that I've used, all of the things I've talked about can be used, are edible. They like marigolds, goodness, you can use them in tea, you can let them go fully to seed and plant some more. All the herbs are all edible. We have what's called dead nettle, which is outside currently. Most of people see them as a weed. They got this beautiful purple top and they have little tiny purple flowers and they kind of look like an arrow. Those can be harvested. They're actually an herb. You can harvest those and make teas out of them. Dandelion flowers, you can make dandelion jelly. Oh, it's to die for right now because there's so many out. So there's they're so good. I could go back. All the herbs I've been using, talking about, can all be used. I try to, none of them are inedible. Like the dried flowers though, right? You're not going to eat lettuce and you're not going to eat straw flower, right? Because they're as a traditional drying flower and baby's breath. So just checking.
There's a question.
Yeah, you do grow straw flower from seed. And I like to start them inside and then I plant them out. You could start them right now. They do take a little bit to get going, but they get quite tall too. They can get quite tall. They can get up to about 3 feet tall if you let them. They're somewhere between 18 inches and 3 feet tall, but they're a wonderful cut drying flower. And they once you get them going, they're really easy to grow. Status also is super easy, and the status comes in like these deep blues and deep pinks and white. And if you mesh all those together, it's really lovely. So that's always a good one. Did we? No, we didn't. Okay. Are there any?
I'll have a question about medicinal herbs.
Yes, and I just talked about that the ones I've mentioned are all edible. And I don't really talk about medicinal herbs so much because that is not in my purview so much. There's other people in our community that are really well versed in medicinal herbs. So
I'm going to put in the chat, and this a caveat, I have not checked this, but I just found a link for native edible and medicinal plants of the Pacific Northwest Project NOAA.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put that in the chat and you can check that out, and I will look also. And then Hal, I can send you there also Erna Gunther's books. She's been deceased for a long time, but she was a UW ethnobotanist. And she has a couple of books on really, really good information on native plants used by Native Americans for all kinds of different uses. So I can send you that information too.
Because I know, you can use the red elderberry. You can still use the red elderberry flowers. We can't eat the berries, but the red elderberry flower can still be harvested and used, say, in teas or tinctures and things like that. And the hawthorn flower is often used as well in medicinal salves and things like that. So there's a lot out there. Kendra of KV Apothecary, she would probably be my go-to for medicinal and herbal questions. And that's, I'll put that in the chat, Kendra with KV Apothecary, because she is well versed. She actually went to school for this kind of thing.
Is that local?
Yeah, Kendra is, she lives here in Tacoma. KV Apothecary. Yeah, her products. Oh, did I spell that wrong? Her products are sold here in Tacoma in various different places. I think I might have spelled that wrong, but okay. There you go. Okay, I will spell this right. There we go. Okay. Kendra, KV Apothecary. You'll find her. She used to sell at the farmers markets. She's doing less of that, but I know that you can email her. I don't have her email available at the moment, but yeah, Kendra of KV Apothecary. She's a wealth of knowledge. So yeah, for if anybody's interested in the medicinal side of that, so she would be who I would go to here in Tacoma.
So we also want to mention, I'm putting in Garden Sphere's email again, for their website again, because a lot of people sometimes don't find it. It's a .biz, B-I-Z, not .com. So let me put that in again. And then Jenny, do you want to mention about what they are offering for a discount this weekend?
Yes, yeah. And Garden Sphere also can be found on Facebook as well. So if you're on Facebook, then you can put in Garden Sphere. And then for those of you who are attending today, at Garden Sphere, if you say that I took the herb class with Jenny with the EnviroHouse, you will get 20% off of your purchases today and tomorrow. So today and tomorrow, so April 30th and May 1st, you'll get 20% off of your purchases if you say that you were here in the class. So yay to that.
Okay, and I am going to also put my contact information. If anyone if you aren't able to copy the links, email me and I can send you the list that I'm copying from. Also, we have coming up next week, May 7th, we have rain gardens, how to prepare, plant, maintain. May 14th, and this is going to be interesting. I'm not sure how this is going to work. We're going to try to do how to make a rain barrel and with Dan Borba. So I'm not sure how that's going to work in transmitting with a webinar, but we're going to try it. May 21st, we're doing pollinator gardens again with Jenny. And then we have, I don't have them here, I'm not promoting them right now, but they are online, the June webinars. And Jenny will be back with us in June to do how to deal with weeds and pests with non-toxic solutions. And then, as I mentioned in the chat, Hel will be with us, Helming will be with us in July to do one on ways that you can preserve and use spices and herbs and various kinds of things and how to make combinations. So lots of good information coming up. And then I also put in the chat, if you don't have it, if you're not on the EnviroNews listserv, it's an opportunity to have, it's nonprofit, it's managed by Citizens for a Healthy Bay. Now it used to be City. And it's a way where a lot of environmental announcements, job announcements, events, activities, and I put workshop announcements, webinar announcements out there too. So I put the information in the chat on how to register, to sign up to be on that listserv if you're not on there. If you can't find that, send me an email and I will send that information to you too. So if there are no other questions.
And you have to go to Dan's workshop. Dan is fantastic. He is the nicest fellow, and he knows everything there is to know about rain barrels. Like, he is the rain barrel guru. So
yes, it is. And we do have videos, a how-to video on how to make and then another how to install, which he's done really well. So if I can't figure out anything else, I may have to incorporate part of that video in the webinar, but I'm hoping this works out.
All right.
So,
well, thank you everybody for coming. This was great. Have a great, wonderful Saturday. Yeah.
yeah. And enjoy your herbs. So thank you. And we will see you next time. Thanks, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.